This is Jay Addison from eventchain.io for Investment Pitch Media and FinTech News Network. Welcome to Blockchain Interviews. Today we have Matthew Unger, the CEO of iComplyICO. Matthew, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Jay?
I'm doing excellent. Matthew, what is iComplyICO?
iComply is, in short version, is compliance automation software. So we have a kind of a platform approach towards compliance. We focus currently on the ICO market, so the initial coin offering space, to bring some regulation and compliance tools. A lot of people are raising money in this way without, originally there was little regard for regulation, and now there's a lot of concern about being offside from a lot of ICO issuers and their law firms and accounting firms, et cetera. So that's really what we're there to solve, is to provide an immutable ledger of the different compliance procedures that have been executed on a trade in a decentralized economy, or whether it's blockchain or mesh or anything like that.
That sounds great. The sector definitely needs it, so I think you guys are right on target with that project. Who's on the team? Tell us a little bit about the team.
Yeah, the team is quite big. We've got a pretty high octane burn, I guess you could say. We've got our CTO is coming from the world's third largest instance of .NET. Our systems architect and a number of people on our tech team have come from the enterprise software world, projects from SAP to Siemens Manufacturing to the cybersecurity for the Israeli military. We've got quite a bit of expertise in both blockchain and decentralization, as well as high performance enterprise scalable type of systems, and that's really where we're trying to come in at. We really had to reach. I come from the world of, originally from the world of securities and finance, and moved into tech about 8 years ago. I've worked a lot in the fintech space. A lot of different projects over the years have been focused on anti-money laundering systems or trading platforms. CRM2 in Canada was a big change for us that required a lot of technical changes, and so I've kind of come from that space. And we didn't have a lot of people directly in our team security side, so a lot of our advisors come from leading firms in Canada, one of the former compliance officers of the NASDAQ, a leading tech firm blockchain firm in Europe, and a number of other legal and tactical advisors that we have. And then some of our investors come from everywhere from MIT, which is where I came up with the original concept of iComply, and kind of this idea of using blockchain to document compliance. And through that network came some of our earliest investors, even some of our advisors. It's actually been a very great and supportive community. And then some of our other investors are coming from former finance executives from Apple, founding members of Uber, a bunch of different projects along those lines. We're really trying to find people that are interested in not only just in the financial return of investing in a company like ours, but also in really our vision of what we're trying to accomplish, which is quite large.
And I know that you also have Peter Piazza on your team, who is one of the most well-known blockchain people in the world, really, and also one of the most brilliant. So hats off to that one, I'll tell you. Peter is a gem for sure. Anyone who's more in the crypto space would probably know him as the Piazza. Yes, exactly.
He's the moderator of the Bitcoin subreddit, and has been just an incredible resource on our team. We're very lucky to have him.
Yeah, he's great. Well. So for iComplyICO, who is your customer, and what problem do you solve for them?
Yeah, so in the ICO space, we solved the problem of compliance, and compliance is interesting. I went through my first audit working in financial services when I was 21. It was 8 days in the business, and the regulator came in to do an audit of the office, and everyone had to get out of their desks. And I remember sweating, even though I had 0 clients. I remember sweating, thinking like, "Oh my goodness, what if I get in trouble?" Even though I hadn't even done anything. There's nothing to do wrong. And a lot of people don't realize, especially in the securities world, compliance is there's three main things. One, you have to have proper procedures, and like, this is how we are going to maintain compliance, and these are our compliance procedures, etc. Then you actually have to do it. And then you have to make sure that every single time you do it, you keep documentation of how you've done it. And when you come from a world of let's say, database management, there's this concept of garbage in, garbage out. And blockchain doesn't do that very well. You need data that goes into blockchain has to meet certain requirements, or the ledger is just not going to proceed. And so this was where we saw a really unique opportunity for documenting compliance. And so within that, right now, the ICO market is a big, kind of a hot space. We see a lot of ICO exchanges, wallets, different integration partners, and we're actually entering technical due diligence now with a couple different stock exchanges around the world to look at how can our compliance API actually be fed into their trading systems, and possibly even to the point where crypto assets could be listed. If they were issued within compliance of securities regulations, could they actually be listed on a traditional stock exchange and available to the average investor through their regular portfolios?
Interesting, yeah. So why is now the time for iComplyICO more than any other time?
It's a crux of a whole bunch of different factors that have played into this. We've seen a massive decline in public listings over the last 10 years. It's been more and more difficult, more and more expensive for companies to issue a public security. But then we also see, we've seen this takeoff, this boom of ICOs that have really proven that the ICO is a very effective vehicle at raising capital. July 25th of this year now, the SEC came out to say that actually these could be considered securities. They're not some utility or something else, but if they meet the requirements or pass the requirements of the Howey test, it's a security, which actually was very exciting for us, because that's really when things took off, where all of a sudden two key things happened. The first, these are now legitimized by the regulators to be able to be used as securities. So for us, it wasn't like, oh no, it was yes, finally. And then the other factor was the fines of non-compliance, and not just securities compliance, but also things like GDPR, which is the Global Data Protection Regulation based out of Europe, is a minimum $20 million fine. So compliance from an ICO perspective can have some pretty serious teeth if you don't follow through. And that's kind of where we're seeing ourselves, the interest in the market, whether it's from a big four firm or a CPA out over their office, or a small lawyer or a major law firm. It seems to be across the board. People are looking for a more efficient way to use technology. And it's really come to a point now where especially in the US, which is kind of we felt that if starting with the US Securities Act, it was a lot easier to move into more lenient jurisdictions than trying to go the other way around. And so that's really the way we focused. And now we see in the US, there's this move towards the CAT, the Consolidated Audit Trail. And a lot of these problems that they're trying to solve, it turns out these are the same problems that we have to solve for compliance in the ICO world. So it's a very exciting time to be a part of this.
So although you're in Canada, the iComplyICO platform will work globally. Is that the idea?
Yes, we're a global platform. We started with the U.S. Securities Act. Even in Canada, our securities regulation is very much, I don't want to say the U.S. Securities Act is a grandfather, but maybe like an uncle. We very closely follow it. A lot of private placements or even just offerings in general reference different parts of the U.S. Securities Act. And then Canada has our national instruments laid over top of a lot of that. And you see this in a lot of places in the world where the U.S. Securities Act is considered in a lot of jurisdictions somewhat of a gold standard that's looked to. And so we felt it was very important to start with the U.S. So we are currently able to support issuers coming from Canada and the U.S., which is something quite unique to a lot of platforms that only focus out of Grand Cayman or Gibraltar or Singapore, as an example. But we wanted to make the ICO as a financial instrument. I don't agree with calling them an asset class. We don't call a public listing an asset class. This is a tool for raising money, like a public listing or a private placement. So we really wanted to make this financial instrument for raising money available to just traditional North American businesses. And out of the applications that we've received, which is in the hundreds, most of them, to the tune of almost 80%, have nothing to do with blockchain.
Really? Wow.
The first company to buy a license on our platform was a Canadian real estate developer. Since then, we've had numerous others from projects all across Canada, ranging anywhere from 12 to about $340 million.
Wow.
And then in the U.S., everything from food manufacturers to fintech startups. It's kind of across the board, but it's really exciting to be at this place where there's actually such a demand for being able to raise capital in an efficient way without having to pay the piper for doing something illegal.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's next for the platform?
Well, I guess a couple big things that we have coming up is this is February here now, and we're getting ready our dev team is right now migrating onto the Ethereum mainnet. So we will be releasing our protocol. And this is one thing that's very different about our solution for compliance versus any other platform coming out there to suggest the idea of offering a legal or a compliant ICO. We do help people with that offering component, which is very much at the interface level. But with blockchain, we had to solve compliance right at the base where the blockchain functions, which is in the protocol itself. So we are releasing two products, which we're very excited to do. The first one is solving that compliance on the transaction, the buy and the sell side of every trade. And we call that the pre-facto compliance protocol. So why we call it pre-fact, in let's say a centralized stock exchange, there's a trade +2, and that +2 is typically there to verify the checks and balances to make sure that compliance has occurred. Whereas in blockchain, as you know, it's immutable. So the transaction goes through and is on the ledger. You can't roll it back without pretty much wreaking havoc on the entire market. So we looked at this to say, well, wait a minute, we can actually, if we do this in a computational way, we can move compliance to the other side of the transaction. And that's really what the pre-facto protocol does. So we're going live on Ethereum, and we are offering the protocol out as a private white label to people if they want to integrate into their own exchanges or their own exchanges or wallets or even into other chains. We're agnostic to the blockchain that's used. So we've built out the availability for any ICO on Ethereum to call into the contracts to have the kind of the cluster of contracts that we require to do it in this way. And we're going to continue to build out new chains as there's market demand for it. So that's the first one. The second product that we are really excited about is what a lot of people don't realize with things like Bitcoin is there's about 400 million Bitcoin addresses out there. Over 300 million of those addresses are linked to a known identity now. And so when you deal with somebody who has a good concept of data mining and web scraping and things like this, you can actually map a lot of these networks. So there's no anonymity that you should expect with blockchain as things continue to move in this way with public chains. And we felt that there was a big concern around this with the idea of my personal information being available to everyone. Every ICO that I go and I launch, that I go and I want to invest in, we kind of have the saying where just because some genius 13-year-old in their basement comes up with a world-changing concept that can be solved with some sort of decentralized solution doesn't necessarily mean that they need every investor's passport photo on their hard drive in their basement.
Yeah.
And so we really wanted to come at this from a different angle, and we really focused on what we call, or what's referred to as zero knowledge proof. The issuer still has access to things like the address and the trade information, but individuals' personal information is they have the ability to keep it to themselves. So we're calling it the iComply ID product. And it's essentially a portable KYC that they can go from one offering to another without having to go through and do all this verification again. And if you're in Canada like we are, as of March, every time you get your verification done in Canada, that's going to ping your credit score and you're going to lose a few points on your credit score. So it's not really sustainable. And there's many other jurisdictions that require credit scores for identity verification as well. So we really wanted to do this in a way that was kind of the best case for the investor, and also try to minimize the amount of friction it takes. Even if you take a look outside the ICO world and you go to a private broker, exempt market dealer, it can be half a day, if not longer, to verify that you're an accredited investor. It doesn't need to be that way anymore. We have technology that can verify these things in a much more efficient manner.
Great idea.
Yeah,
so how can people find iComplyICO?
Well, right now we're kind of all over the place. Things are quite busy. We are, just in connecting in person. We're actually next week, we're holding a small private event for investors. We're doing a seed round right now, so we're just on the tail end of our seed round and closing this month. So we're doing a little investor night on the 13th, but then the 15th and 16th, I'll be speaking at the Bitcoin Super Conference, and actually speaking towards, talking about how blockchain can be used to bridge the gap from this, the new crypto way of doing things and the old traditional way. And we can actually use this technology built to the standard of what the markets require for security and investor protection. And we can actually bridge this gap between the two and enable blockchain to start doing more than a few billion per quarter, and maybe talk about trillions instead. So that's going to be it here in February. In March, I'll be speaking at Money 2020 Asia. We'll release that topic later on, and then we're actually going to be at the IMF World Bank conference in April, and just discussing how this can be used for some harmonization of global legislation and things along these lines. So those are some key things. If people want to reach out to us digitally, we have iComplyICO.com is our website, iComplyICO.com, and then our Twitter, Facebook, Telegram, you can reach us at iComplyICO. We did just open up our Telegram channel, so if anyone's interested in getting in there, we're going to be putting out some very exciting announcements over the next little while and giving people some sneak peeks into what's happening.
That's exciting. Matthew Unger from iComplyICO. It's certainly been a pleasure speaking to you today. Great project. I love the project.
Very exciting. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks. And let's do this again sometime in the coming weeks and give everybody an update.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Great. Thanks kindly.
Take care.